Hello, my name is Rose-Marie Perrault. I work as a neuropsychologist at the Jewish Rehabilitation Hospital in Laval, and I will be giving you some information about coping with stress. Why do we talk about stress? Because stress is considered to be a risk factor for stroke and for many other health problems. So the objectives of this information session are to help you better understand how stress affects you, what your tolerance to stress is, your reactions to stress, and to tell you about a few tips or strategies to better live with and manage stress. Let's start by defining what stress is. So stress is all of the physical and emotional reactions that we experience when we're faced with a situation that's perceived as a threat. So we all experience stress, and the threatening situations that are talked about here may be very immediate, so concrete danger in our environment, or they could be something that we anticipate. For example, if I'm waiting for an appointment with my doctor and he could give me some bad news, that could create some stress as well. So when our brain detects a threatening situation, it secretes stress hormones, so adrenaline and cortisol, which prepare our body to take action. So stress in and of itself is not necessarily bad, and there are good types of stress which can be controlled or managed and which stimulate or activate us to achieve balance in our day-to-day living. We talk about bad stress when there's a feeling of losing control, of fear, of not feeling like you can overcome a situation, and you can experience physical symptoms from this type of stress, and it can interfere with your health and your overall well-being. The universal recipe for stress is captured in the acronym NUTS. Stressful situations tend to be novel, meaning that we've never gone through something like that before, or we don't have experience with something like that. They are often unpredictable, meaning that we didn't know they were going to happen, so we couldn't prepare, or we don't know when they're going to start or to end. They often pose a threat to our ego, or our sense of self, or our abilities. And we often have a low sense of control in them, meaning that we may feel like there's not much that we can do to change the situation. It only takes one of these ingredients to make a situation stressful. But of course, the more nuts ingredients are present in a situation, the higher the stress level will be. So when you think of your stroke, how many of these elements do you feel apply to that situation? For many people who have sustained a stroke, they will say that their stroke encompassed all of these elements. So it's important to remember that you did go through something that can be quite stressful. We distinguish between two types of stress, acute stress and chronic stress. Acute stress is sudden and often unexpected. You can think of the body sensations that are present when you are speaking in public, for example, or telling your employer you are resigning. And with this type of situation or stress, once the situation is over, the sensations and feeling of stress tend to disappear. Whereas in chronic stress, which is prolonged or repetitive, this type of stress can lead to more health problems because it persists for long periods of time. So, for example, if a close one has been in the hospital for a long time or ill for a long time, If you're getting divorced, then we'll be going through the procedures for a long time. Immigrating to a new country can be a situation that's very stressful and that lasts in the long term. Any loss of some kind can create this type of stress. Stress can be felt physically. What happens is when your brain perceives a threat, it secretes hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, which then trigger a series of bodily reactions to prepare you to face a threat. So your heart rate and your breathing rate increase. You may feel that your senses are sharper or you are more alert in general. There's also an increase in body temperature and blood pressure, and your digestion slows down. And you can also feel unpleasant physical symptoms like headaches, shaking, muscle tension. You can have trouble sleeping, have hot flashes, butterflies in your stomach, less appetite. And this is what we could consider the first stage of stress when you're initially facing a stressful situation. Now, if this stressful situation is ongoing, you may reach a second stage of stress where you feel like you're under pressure and you may start giving up good habits. You could start eating more or not eating well, feeling more tense, more anxious, lacking concentration, and start feeling more tired. And when a stress is chronic, or when you have it in the longer term, this is when you start feeling exhausted. And this is the stage that could be a greater risk for cardiovascular problems. Stress can also manifest itself through typical thought patterns or emotions. So if you are stressed out, you could have a negative perception of the situation and have a harder time finding the positive side or the silver lining in a situation. You could also feel more irritable and more impatient. You could have a tendency to ruminate. So this is when thoughts play out in your mind over and over again, and they're very hard to control. You could experience decrease in sex drive, or self-esteem, or self-confidence in your ability to face the situation. You could have difficulty concentrating, as we said before, and making even simple decisions. And in the long run, you could experience more fatigue and feelings of being under pressure. When you are stressed out, you could also have a tendency to adopt certain behaviors that are typical of stress. For example, you could act in a more disorganized or agitated manner. So it could be harder to take a step back, analyze the situation rationally, and plan and act calmly in the situation. You could also have a tendency to miss work or miss certain activities like therapy, for example. You could have a tendency to isolate yourself from others and to procrastinate or avoid situations that stress you out. And as we said, it's also hard to keep up good habits when you are stressed out, and you can fall back into unhealthy habits, even though you know they're not good for you. It's just harder to control. And well, this could concern food, alcohol or drugs, smoking, drinking too much caffeine. As we saw, stress can cause a series of physical, emotional, behavioral, and cognitive reactions. But what are the long-term consequences? In terms of blood pressure, there is a nuance to be made. So although when you go through a stressful situation, your body will produce a surge of hormones, which will temporarily increase your blood pressure, there is no proof that stress by itself causes long-term high blood pressure. But through other biological mechanisms and through your reaction to stress, you can have an increase in the risk for heart disease or stroke. For example, if you react to stress in unhealthy ways, like smoking, drinking too much alcohol, or eating unhealthy foods. Chronic stress also puts you at risk for mental health problems and insomnia and judgment errors. For example, if you make impulsive decisions, if your perception of the situation is fueled by your stress response, this can increase the risk for judgment errors. Given all the possible negative consequences of stress and also the importance of the way we react to stress as a predictor of these consequences, I would like to talk to you about a few stress management strategies. Let's start by talking about a few less effective coping strategies. And it's important to mention that we all tend to use these strategies from time to time, and that's not necessarily a problem all the time. But however, when you stay in these coping strategies, they all tend to prevent you from facing the problem, and they tend to be unhelpful in the long run. So avoidance or ignoring the problem or being in denial means that you refuse to really look at it or to admit that something is really happening. And this is aimed at protecting yourself from the stress, from the negative emotions that the situation is causing you. But of course, it's not very helpful in the long run. Procrastination or avoidance is really when you do not want to place yourself in the situation that is causing the stress. For example, if you are afraid of a medical result that your doctor is supposed to communicate to you, well, you may avoid going to see him altogether. And venting is something that feels good in the short term. So really letting out those emotions, but focusing on the negative situation and talking about it over and over again. It feels good in the short term, but it's usually not a way to move forward and start looking for solutions. So what can we do to manage our stress and our anxiety in ways that will be helpful in the long run? Well, the first set of strategies is about creating healthy life habits. And this may seem like a simplistic way of looking at things, but it's actually the basis that can allow us to balance our daily life and our daily responsibilities that can increase our stress. So, for example, making time for rest and relaxation periods in your schedule can be helpful. Fostering healthy sleep habits to have enough energy in the day, and balancing rest with active periods. So studies show that physical activity is a good way of managing stress. And eating well is also another thing that can be helpful. Engaging in fun, pleasurable activities can also help you manage stress by taking your mind off of things for a little bit, changing your ideas, changing your mood. So little simple things like laughing, watching a funny movie, for example, listening to music or singing if that's something you enjoy, petting an animal, engaging in a hobby that you enjoy that allows you to really be in the present moment. going on social outings or nature walks. Those are all helpful things that can shift the hormonal secretion and stop the body's natural cycle of stress activated by a stressful situation. Many relaxation strategies can also be helpful in managing stress because they trigger the relaxation response, which is opposed to the stress response. So in the relaxation response, your heart rate and your breathing rate tend to slow down and become more regular, and you can have a decrease in alertness, and you can just feel a general sense of well-being and restfulness. And there are many different relaxation techniques. You could just, for example, listen to music that you enjoy. If you do yoga or stretching, that could help too. Breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, meditation, hypnosis, and visualization are all different techniques that can be used for relaxation. And if you're not familiar with these techniques, there are many videos or recordings that you can find online or in libraries. And if you have a follow-up with a psychologist, you could also talk to them about it. At the personal and social level, several things could be helpful. For example, scheduling free time and allowing yourself to free up your schedule and not be involved in 1,000 different things. Taking time for yourself could really be beneficial. For some people, exploring their spirituality brings them a real sense of comfort and well-being. Performing acts of kindness, practicing gratitude can also be very helpful. Talking to others or getting support from others, or even just doing something with someone that takes your mind off of things can be helpful. And lastly, setting limits, allowing yourself to say no to demands for help or no to activities. You are allowed to take some time for yourself. All the tips and tricks that we talked about can be helpful in helping you navigating stressful situations. And in fact, I encourage you to try out a few of them to see which ones work for you, which ones are helpful to you, and to see that as an experiment and as getting to know yourself better. However, if you are going through an intensely stressful situation, or you've been stressed out for a while, or feeling anxiety, and you're finding that you're not functioning as well, then it can be useful and even sometimes necessary to ask for professional help. And professional help is not necessarily going to solve everything, but it may help you to restore emotional, psychological, and physical well-being. And in terms of professional help, you could seek help from your family doctor, from specialists like psychiatrists, from psychologists, social workers, nurses, and public health workers from the CLSC. Other public services are available and can be helpful depending on the specific situation or need. For example, employee assistance programs that are available through the workplace and give you access to psychologists or social workers. There are also substance dependence centers, community centers in your neighborhood that can offer certain counseling services, financial consultants if there is a stressful financial situation. And support groups can be a wonderful resource, and they are available through the CLSC or other organizations. And if you have questions and you're unsure how to get in touch with one of these resources, don't hesitate to ask a team member for help. Finally, there are resources that are quite accessible from your home or in the community, such as books, videos, community or online courses, websites, and that's a good thing because the information is easily accessed. However, it's important to consider options that respect your financial situation and to be mindful of the professional expertise of those you may consult, the credibility of the websites that you consult, etc., to make sure that the information that you get out of these resources is credible and really helpful.